Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Arjuna. Yashodanandana Bhajana Arjuna. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Arjuna. Yashodanandana Bhajana Arjuna. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Arjuna. Yashodanandana Bhajana Arjuna. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. So I'm going to read the text, the present text, 21, and we'll do the regular recitation. But then I'd like to give a synopsis of where we are in this chapter. There may be some devotees who are listening, and because the verse I have begins in the middle of Krishna describing the soul, I just want to give a flow of how it goes, how Krishna was speaking, how Arjuna was speaking, and also the most important points in this chapter is also the fact that Arjuna was giving his arguments, but finally he surrendered to Krishna as being his instructor, his spiritual master. And then the second part is when Krishna actually takes the position and also starts trying to bring Arjuna out of his illusion about his relationships and the challenges he's having in his life at the present moment on the battlefield. And actually we know that Arjuna is a pure devotee, but Arjuna's in that position because Krishna wanted him to be the recipient of this knowledge so that we as living entities can live our life in that way and we can have the information about how to live our lives. So I'll read the verse and the translation, and then I'll start from where I want to, at least review what we've been through. So this is chapter 2 entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized, and we're on text 21. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vedāvināśinaṁ. Nityam. Ya. Enam. Ajam. Avyayam. Katham. Sa. Puruṣaḥ. Pārtha kam ghātayati hanti kam vedāvināśinaṁ nityam ya enam ajam avyayam kathaṁ puruṣaḥ Pārtha kam ghātayati hanti kam vedāvināśinaṁ nityam ya enam ajam avyayam katham sa puruṣaḥ Pārtha kam ghātayati hanti kam vedāvināśinaṁ nityam ya enam ajam avyayam katham sa puruṣaḥ Pārtha kam ghātayati hanti kam. Devotees.
vedāvināśinaṁ nityam
Vedāvināśinaṁ nityam
enam ajam avyayam
avyayam
kathaṁ puruṣaḥ
Pārtha
kam ghātayati hanti kam
ghātayam
vedāvināśinaṁ nityam enam ajam avyayam kathaṁ puruṣaḥ Pārtha
kam ghātayati hanti kam vedāvināśinaṁ ya enam ajam avyayam katham sa puruṣaḥ Pārtha katham sa kam vedāvināśinaṁ nityam enam ajam avyayam katham sa puruṣaḥ Pārtha kam ghātayati hanti kam. Anyone else? Okay, word for word. Veda knows. Avināśinam, indestructible. Nityam, always existing. Ya, one who. Enam, this soul. Ajam, unborn. Avyayam, immutable. Katham, how. Saha, that. Puruṣaḥ, person. Pārtha, O Pārtha Arjuna. Kam, whom. Ghātayati, causes to hurt. Hanti, kills. Kam, whom. Translation and purport by His Very Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. O Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? Please repeat, O Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? Purport. Everything has its proper utility, and a man who is situated in complete knowledge knows how and where to apply a thing for its proper utility. Similarly, violence also has its utility, and how to apply violence rests with the person in knowledge. Although the justice of the peace awards capital punishment to a person condemned for murder, the justice of the peace cannot be blamed because he orders violence to another person according to the codes of justice. In Manu-saṁhitā, the law book for mankind, it is supported that a murderer should be condemned to death, so that in his next life he will not have to suffer for the great sin he has committed. Therefore, the king's punishment of hanging a murderer is actually beneficial. Similarly, when Krishna orders fighting, it must be concluded that violence is for supreme justice, and thus Arjuna should follow the instruction, knowing well that such violence committed in the act of fighting for Krishna is not violence at all, because at any rate the man, or rather the soul, cannot be killed. So, for the administration of justice, so-called violence is permitted. A surgical operation is not meant to kill the patient, but to cure him. Therefore, the fighting to be executed by Arjuna at the instruction of Krishna is with full knowledge, so there is no possibility of sinful reaction. Om Gyanā Timarandasya Gana Gana Salakaya Chakshunamritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Caitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Siyuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaisnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagvajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Stam Sajivam Savadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Caitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha E Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kante Radha Kanta Namosute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhi Vrindavaneshwari Vrisabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kapyas Tarubhyas Cha Kripa Sindhu Bhieva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaisnavyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay. I was also, when I was doing research and preparing for the class, I was looking through the book by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Sarata Varsini Tika, and his commentaries. And actually he goes into more detail about the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, and the arguments that Arjuna is giving and Krishna's reply. And so this, as I said, this chapter 2 is entitled The Contents of the Gita Summarizes Atmanatma Viveka Yoga. And that means distinguishing the soul from the body. So in the previous chapter, the one entitled, the first one, Observation of the Army on the Battlefield of Kurukshetra, Sanjaya told Dhritarashtra that the conclusion was that Arjuna, he decided he's not inclined to fight, he won't fight. So that made Dhritarashtra kind of happy, and he was thinking that the Pandavas would renounce their claim to the kingdom and to the throne. So then Sanjaya starts talking to Dhritarashtra and explains to him how Krishna is talking, what is the conversation between them, and how Krishna is inspiring Arjuna to fight. Okay. So the title of this chapter, Contents of the Gita Summarized, it's the summation of the whole Gita, actually, because it describes the subject matters of karma yoga, jnana yoga, and also gives a glimpse of bhakti yoga. So these are the topics that are discussed in the whole Gita. And we know that the Gita has 3 parts. There's karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and then jnana yoga. So as I said before, we know that Arjuna is a pure devotee. He's an eternal associate of Krishna, and he's a pure devotee. And Krishna wanted him to hear this, because he wanted to continue the disciplic succession, but also, why did he pick Krishna? Why did Krishna pick Arjuna to hear? Why did he? We all have heard it so many times, so why did he pick Arjuna? What was the reason?
He was non-envious and friend of Krishna.
Yes, he was non-envious, which was really important. Because the only reason we're here is because we're on this earth is because we're envious of Krishna. We were envious of Krishna. So he picked Arjuna because he was his dear friend. And he was non-envious. And throughout the Gita, and especially when you read the commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in the conversation, there's such an exchange of affection between Arjuna and Krishna. It's really very sweet, actually. So it's said in text 16 of the chapter that this knowledge about the soul and the material body is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance. And to drive away such ignorance, the Lord teaches the Bhagavad-Gita for the enlightenment of all living entities for all time. So we all should read the Gita daily and benefit from its instructions for our lives. So in this chapter also, Lord Krishna presents an analytical study of the material body and the spirit soul. And this is called Gyan, or Sankhya. And he talks about working with and without attachment to results. And that's Sakarma and Niskarma karma. And the characteristics of a person fixed in the conception of the real self, and the real self being the spirit soul. And he is called Sthita Prajna, one situated in pure transcendental knowledge. So I'm going to try to get through this because I was thinking it's really important to review what we've already heard, because sometimes we may not remember, or we need to make a connection of certain information that we've heard from the previous classes, or maybe we've missed the previous classes. So just to connect everything together. So in verses 1 through 10 is about Arjuna's indecision in accepting the Lord Krishna as his guru. And we know that when he surrenders, that's in chapter 2, verse 7, is when he finally decides, okay, I'm going to surrender to you, Krishna, because I'm confused. And there are times we know when we get confused in our lives about trying to make a decision about something. We don't know what to do. We get confused. So in a capsule, in verses 1 through 3, Krishna chastises Arjuna, and he disapproved of his so-called compassion upon his so-called relatives. But they're ready to get on with the battle. His so-called relatives, they're ready for the battle because they're wanting to get the kingdom and steal the kingdom from the Pandavas, but Krishna had other plans. His plan was to put Yudhisthira on the throne and to bring back the religious principles in which the Praja can be ruled by. And so Krishna is telling Arjuna that material compassion, lamentation, and tears are all signs of ignorance of the real self. And in Canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, Text 33, it is said that the difference of self-realization and material illusion is to know that the temporary or illusory impositions of material energy in the shape of gross and subtle bodies all are superficial coverings of the real self. And this is the knowledge which Krishna wants to impart to Arjuna. But Arjuna is putting forth these arguments. Why? We know what the arguments are, and he's concerned about Dharma. So according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Arjuna tells Krishna not to think that he's not acting from a lack of bravery or of being a coward. He's saying that he's considering the precepts of Dharma in regards to his elders and those to whom he feels they're worshipable. He should be offering flowers to their lotus feet, not arrows, to their body. And according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Krishna is saying to Arjuna that as a son of Pritha, your actions are shameful. Don't give in to this. It may happen to inferior Kshatriyas, but not to you, my friend. So he's still showing affection to Arjuna. And so then in verses 4 through 6, Arjuna is expressing more arguments, further doubts and confusion. And when we have doubts and confusion and we are surrendered to a spiritual master, we should go to the spiritual master to get our doubts cleared up, to get clarity. So then Arjuna replies to Krishna, don't worry about my lack of bravery. I'm considering the precepts of Dharma in regard to Bhishma, Drona, and other elders, and I'm feeling compassion towards Dhritarashtra and kin who will die by my weapons. So later on in the chapter, we read that Krishna explains to Arjuna that the weapons kill the body, but the soul cannot be killed. So you won't be killing anybody. So he goes further into depth about the description of the soul. And then Arjuna further argues that according to Dharma, if those who should be respected and worshipped are not, this becomes the cause for bondage. And we know the other arguments he gives about the traditions and how the women, will be polluted. He gives these, and I just want to interject this, everything Krishna does is perfect. There's no error in anything that Krishna does. So certainly, when the fight is over and Krishna has established what he wants to have established, that those persons who were affected by the war, and especially the women who lost all their husbands in that war, certainly they're going to be protected. Because look, even Yudhisthira took in Dhritarashtra, and Dhritarashtra was the one who, wanted to kill them. So if Dhritarashtra was taken care of by Yudhisthira because of Yudhisthira's piety and his integrity, certainly all those persons who were affected by the war are going to be protected. So everything Krishna does is perfect. It's always perfect. So in response to Arjuna's argument about Dharma, Krishna says, this is not discretion arising from principles of Dharma, nor is it mercy. It is bewilderment and lamentation, which are indications of a weak mind. Therefore, give up this weakness of mind, O conqueror of enemies. But Arjuna is still thinking of them as great souls, even though their behavior goes against the concept of Dharma. So this conversation continues between Arjuna and Krishna until the 7th verse, wherein, despite so many arguments, Arjuna finally understands that his intelligence is in complete bewilderment about what to do, about what is actual Dharma. He is saying, and this is from the commentaries, he says his satya nature has been overcome by weakness. And so he finally understands that he needs to surrender to Krishna as his guide through the labyrinth of his own mind. And how many of us have had this problem when we have a problem and it's rotating around in our mind and we're not understanding what we need to do, what we need to do about the situation, whatever situation we become perplexed about. And then Krishna says, but if you defeat my words by posing as a learned person, how can I speak? Now this is Krishna saying this. He's like, you're already giving all the arguments, so what can I say? And then Arjuna says, okay, I'm your student and I will no longer uselessly oppose you. So we know that Krishna is giving Arjuna some admonishment about his so-called compassion. And that can be sometimes, applied to the Guru in our lives. His position is to keep us on the right path, and sometimes his words may be cutting when he's trying to direct us in the right path and give us the advice that will help us. And we also are surrendered. When we take a spiritual master, we're surrendering to his advice, and we're sharing with him the difficulties and the doubts that we have in our lives, and especially when we have major decisions to make, like whether to get married or who to get married to, or even, when you're a grihasta and you plan to have a family, you discuss it with your spiritual master. So whatever major and even minor things that happen, you have a spiritual master. You can share with him what are your difficulties, so he can help. That's why you took initiation, so that he can help you with the issues. Because certainly, we're going to have the issues because we're living in this material world. So Krishna is helping Arjuna to overcome the obstacles on the path, which may come in the form of ignorance, false ego, particularly thinking that we're the body. And the Guru's service is also to bring the living entity out of the knot of attachment to this material world. And sometimes his words can cut like a knife. So as this chapter progresses, we will note that in this chapter, verse 7, Arjuna surrenders and finally accepts him as his spiritual master. So again, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Krishna didn't want to embarrass Arjuna by laughing at his bewilderment. So it's said in the Gita that Krishna slightly smiled, especially since Arjuna had decided to surrender and become Krishna's student. So Krishna didn't laugh. Instead, he just smiled slightly. And the Lord of the senses, Hrishikesh, was previously controlled by the words of Arjuna out of love for him. And this is in Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 1, verse 24. And now he became the controller of Arjuna's mind. Again, out of love for the benefit of Arjuna. So this chapter, this verse 7 becomes the turning point. And then, so now Krishna has taken the part of the instructing spiritual master, and Arjuna has taken the role of the disciple, of the student. So in text 11 through 30, Krishna is giving an analysis of the body and the soul, the difference between matter and spirit. So in this section, just up to the verse we're having for today, which is 21, Krishna tells Arjuna several points. I'll go through the points, verse by verse. He's telling Arjuna, you're lamenting for what is not worthy of lamentation due to your attachment to friends and relatives. You're uttering words of wisdom when actually you have no wisdom. You are saying that Dharma Sastra was stronger than Artha Sastra, but I say that Jnana Sastra, teaching about Atma, is stronger than Dharma Sastra. And on to 12. He tells Arjuna that there was never a time when I, you, or all these kings did not exist. Further explanation by the Lord is that previous non-existence, prag-abhava, is absent from all souls, including that since the jiva and the paramatma are both eternal, there's no need for lamentation. In verse 13, then the famous verse is spoken, Dehosmin, Dehinosmin, Yata Dehi Kamaran Yovana Jara. And I remember when I first came into the Krishna consciousness movement, all the devotee children that I met, they knew this verse by heart. If you asked them, what verse talks about the spirit soul, and they would all repeat because they had memorized this verse. So it's saying just as the soul passes through, it talks about the different stages of life, manhood, youthhood, and all, then he attains another body. So Krishna is saying, don't lament. So in the commentary, I'm paraphrasing from the comments, just as one does not lament for the destruction of the objects of affection in boyhood and youth forms of the body which are related to the soul, so therefore no one also should lament for the destruction of the object of affection, the body, which is also related to the soul. But we know with the destruction of youth and attaining old age, sometimes we lament because we see that we're diminishing. We can't do anything, hardly anything that we used to be able to do when we were young. We're having different aches and pains as the body. It's like, I always compare it to like a machine or a car. You take the car in because once you drive it off the lot, it starts to depreciate. And you find after some time you have to keep taking it to get repaired or have something done because it's having so much use that it's going down. So it's the same way with the body. Actually, when I was reading this, I was also thinking about an incident with my family. My father, he had developed cancer and he was in the hospital. And I went the first day to see him. And then I didn't come back till about a week later. And when I went to see him, I went into the room and then I came right out. Even though there was somebody in the bed, I didn't recognize him. So I came out and I asked the nurse, where's my father? And she said, that's him. And so I went back in again. And what I noted, and the reason I couldn't recognize him, because for me, my father was the biggest thing in my life. I was very close to him, and he was like a hero to me. And he was in the army, and he was in charge of so many things, so many soldiers, some brigade, and this and that, and he always had a powerful presence. But what I noticed when I went to see him, and because I didn't recognize him, it seemed like he had kind of like, I could see the diminishment of his body, and I didn't recognize him because the spirit soul was leaving. And so I didn't recognize him at all. So this also happens, like when I watched the disappearance of my own spiritual master, That's for me a cause of lamentation because he was my spiritual master. And so we do lament when we start deteriorating. We can't do the things we used to do or perform the services that we want to do. Because when we're surrendered to devotional service, we want to give our all, 100%, to doing that service. But sometimes we can't. We can't stand as long as we used to cook all day. So many things we can't sit on the floor anymore to make garlands. We have to sit on a chair. So we can see, that the body is going. So in 14, the heading is we tolerate the temporary dualities. In the proper discharge of duty, we have to learn to tolerate the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress. And we've experienced these even while performing devotional service. Sometimes we may have a disagreement with a devotee, or we have conflict with a devotee, or we're not satisfied with how, one person may be doing something. So many things happen when we interact, right? But my realization was that I'm not here for my own happiness. I'm not supposed to be doing devotional service so I can be happy. I'm doing devotional service, hopefully, so that I can please the Lord. And whether it's difficult or not, I remember when I had my services, I was in Gita Nagari. There's a farm, ISKCON farm, called Gitanagari. And I would sometimes tell my spiritual master that I'm having difficulties. This is so hard. You know, I'm having conflicts with the devotees. And even I was doing the treasury too, and you know, I would have to have a disagreement with them about what they needed for money. It was such a hard service. But my Guru Maharaj would tell me, this is not a personality contest. Just do your duty, because this is what the duty I have given you, so please do it. So we do have difficulties, but it's not for our sense gratification, nor is it for our own personal happiness. And because I continued with it, my Guru Maharaj, you know, became satisfied with my service. We can't say, okay, I'm done, I quit. Like we do a job. It's not like that. So in 15, so we should meet all the dualities with equanimity, because that will give us liberation, you know. We should practice tolerance with discernment. And then, you know, with the passage of time, you know, the distress will maybe disappear. We should be steady in our determination. Determination and faith and tolerance in devotional service are very important. So we should be steady in determination in order to progress to the advanced stage of spiritual realization, which is what we all want. And in that purport, Prabhupada speaks specifically about sannyasis who have to give up their families, you know, to make themselves available to the rest of the world. So they have to sacrifice, they have to give up their family in order to do that, to be free, to travel and go and give themselves to all the conditioned souls that they can. And he gave the example of Lord Chaitanya, who gave up, and he was young, he was only 24, who gave up his family, his young wife, as well as his elder mother. And then in 16, covers matter versus spirit. And it says that no permanent existence for the body is there, no change for the eternal soul. And that the body changes every moment by the actions and reactions of different cells. So we know that it's said in the science that the cells in the body change, I think, every 7 years. So despite the changes in the body, the spirit soul remains the same. This is a difference between matter and spirit. And the living entity is bewildered in ignorance. So to remove this ignorance, we have to reestablish our relationship with Krishna as his parts and parcels and understand our eternal position as servants. And also understand the difference between Krishna and ourselves. He's the energetic and we are his energies. And we're always subordinate to the Lord. And number 17 speaks of the soul being indestructible. And this verse more clearly explains the nature of the soul. It says each and every body is the embodiment of an individual soul, and the symptoms of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. And the size is 1/10,000th part of the upper portion of the hair, point in size. So the influence of this spiritual spark is felt all over the body as consciousness. And even though it's that very, very small, it enlivens the whole body. The devotees are attracted because of the spirit soul in their body. And they're nourishing that spiritual soul by becoming servants of the Lord and performing devotional service. And the Lord says, before I say this, the soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. It is floating in the 5 kinds of air, prana, apana, vayana, samana, and udana, and is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. When the soul is purified from the contamination of the 5 kinds of material air, its spiritual influence is exhibited. And the Lord says in Srimad Bhagavatam 11, Canto 11, Chapter 16, Text 11, Sukshamanam apya aham jivaha of small things, I am the jiva. In text 18, the material body versus the spirit soul. So perishable, the material body is perishable by nature. We see everything in the material world deteriorates. Buildings, cars, whatever is there, everything deteriorates. So we also deteriorate because this body is made of material elements, which we have to let go of, either immediately or after some time. But the spirit soul is so minute that it cannot even be seen by an enemy, what to say of being killed. So Krishna is also telling Arjuna, no need for lamentation. The material body cannot be saved, nor can the spirit soul, the living entity, be killed. So nobody's killing anybody. The spirit soul maintains the body, and when it leaves the body begins to decompose. And the soul does, in 19, it's covered, the soul doesn't kill or get killed. And when embodied, and when the embodied living entity is hurt by fatal weapon, it's to be understood that the living entity within the body is not killed. The spirit soul is so small that it cannot be killed. The body only is killed, but that does not encourage animal slaughter or committing violence upon any living entity. Because what we're doing when we do that is that particular soul is supposed to be in that body because he's working out his karma. And it's like someone kicking you out of your apartment when you're supposed to be there and you've already paid the rent. So the living entity who's in a cow's body, who's being slaughtered, or any entity that we kill, we notice that devotees don't kill any living entity, whether it's a roach or a fly or whatever. We put them outside. We try to, because we already realize that we cannot do that. We're not the givers of life, so we can't take a life. And so the law of the Lord and the law of whatever state, doesn't condone killing. But Arjuna is being encouraged to kill because he's engaged in killing for the principles of religion and not whimsically. And of course, as I said before, Krishna has the perfect plan. And if Krishna has the perfect plan, then we should try to surrender to that plan. And so in text 20, it is said that the soul never dies. He never undergoes the 6 changes which pertain only to this body: birth, existence, growth, producing byproducts, dwindling, and death. The spirit soul has no past, present, or future. And sometimes it's called the steady or the kuta star. So then we get up to 21, which says no one can kill the soul. So the question asked by Krishna is, O Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? And here he gives the example in this purport about, how to apply the proper utility. He gives the example of the judge who gives a murderer a sentence of death because the soul has to pay for killing one other person, and better for him to pay for it in this life than have to suffer in the next life for having killed someone. So at the judge's discretion, he gives capital punishment. And there's so much protest against capital punishment because maybe it's applied unfairly sometimes, but the persons who are against it don't understand the law of karma. They don't understand it, or that the body cannot be killed. So at the end of this purport, it is said that Arjuna should follow an instruction, knowing well that such violence committed in the act of fighting for Krishna is not violence at all. It's not violence. At any rate, the man, or rather the soul, cannot be killed. So, for the administration of justice, so-called violence is permitted. Therefore, the fighting has to be executed by Arjuna at the instruction of Krishna with full knowledge, constant full knowledge. And I also wanted to mention that we can see, if we are familiar with the Mahabharata, that it's not that because Krishna surrendered, because Arjuna surrendered, that he wasn't at all ever confused throughout the battle, because we know he was. He still had some doubts or had some holdback, like for instance when he was supposed to kill Bhishma-dev, and Krishna got upset with him. You're just playing with Bhishma-dev. You're not even putting your full power into killing. That's when Krishna jumped off the chariot with his wheel and was going to go kill Bhishma-dev himself, because he could see that Arjuna was still reluctant, still struggling with the affection that he had for Bhishma-dev. He was still struggling with it. And also when Kṛṣṇa, Arjuna wanted to follow the codes. He's telling Krishna, well, he's off his chariot. I'm not supposed to kill. And then Krishna had to remind him, look, he wasn't following. He killed your son, and all of them killed your son, and he was in on it. So how are you going to have these sentimental feelings when I'm telling you what to do? So still, he had to be there to help Arjuna through his problems, his kind heart. He had to help him through the steps of going through this battle. But in the end, of course, in the end, we know that Krishna established the reign of Yudhisthira. And so I'll end it here, and it's almost 7, but maybe we have 2 minutes if anyone has any questions or comments or suggestions or criticisms or corrections. Anyone? Okay. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.